The mysterious art, how to be feared without threatening. There exists a paradox in human nature that few dare to explore. Throughout history, the most powerful individuals were not those who raised their voices or clenched their fists, but those who commanded respect through an invisible force that others could feel but never quite explain. What if I told you that true intimidation has nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with presence? What if the secret to being genuinely feared lies not in what you do, but in what you choose not to reveal? Consider the silent figure in any room who draws attention without saying a word. Think about those rare individuals who make others second-guess themselves simply by existing in the same space. These people have mastered something ancient, something that predates modern psychology yet aligns perfectly with contemporary neuroscience. They understand that fear, in its purest form, is not about physical threat, but about psychological uncertainty. The human brain is wired to fear the unknown more than the known danger. A charging lion is terrifying but predictable. A shadow that might be a lion is infinitely more unsettling because the mind fills the void with possibilities far worse than reality. This is the foundation upon which we build our exploration today. You're about to discover why the most formidable people in history were masters of mystery, not masters of war. Ancient philosophers understood this principle long before modern science could explain it. They recognized that power derived from uncertainty creates a deeper, more lasting impression than power derived from force. When Marcus Aurelius walked through Rome, people didn't fear his sword, but they feared his judgment. When Cleopatra entered a room, hearts raced not because of threats she made, but because of calculations she might be making. These figures had learned to weaponize the space between stimulus and response, turning silence into their greatest ally. But here's where most people fail in their understanding of intimidation. They confuse being feared with being disliked. They mistake respect for terror. True psychological dominance doesn't create enemies, it creates admirers who are simultaneously unsettled. It is the difference between a dictator who rules through oppression and a chess master who wins through moves their opponent never sees coming. The neuroscience behind this phenomenon is fascinating. When we encounter someone whose thoughts and intentions remain opaque to us, our brain's threat detection system activates, but without a clear target to focus on. This creates what psychologists call productive anxiety, where the mind becomes hyper-vigilant, constantly trying to decode signals that may not even exist. The person generating this response doesn't need to lift a finger or raise their voice. They simply need to master the art of strategic ambiguity. Throughout the next several minutes, we'll examine how this mysterious power manifests in real-world situations. You'll understand why some people can clear a path through a crowded room without saying "excuse me," why certain individuals can end arguments with a single glance, and why the most successful negotiators often say the least. More importantly, you'll learn how to cultivate this presence yourself, ethically and effectively. The first principle of mysterious intimidation lies in understanding the power of withholding. In our age of oversharing and constant communication, the person who reveals nothing becomes infinitely intriguing. When everyone else is broadcasting their thoughts, emotions, and intentions, the individual who maintains silence suddenly becomes the most important person in the conversation. This isn't about being antisocial or withdrawn. This is about understanding that information is currency, and the person who spends it recklessly becomes poor, while the person who hoards it becomes wealthy. Consider how this plays out in professional environments. During meetings, most people feel compelled to contribute, to prove their value through verbal participation. They interrupt, they elaborate, they fill every silence with their voice. But watch what happens when someone consistently chooses to speak only when their words will carry maximum impact. Their rare contributions are weighted with significance that others' constant chatter cannot match. Colleagues begin to wonder what they're thinking, what they know, what they're planning. This wondering creates a psychological dynamic where the silent person becomes the center of attention without demanding it. The same principle applies to emotional regulation. While others wear their hearts on their sleeves, displaying anger, frustration, excitement, or disappointment like weather patterns across their faces, the psychologically intimidating person maintains an emotional poker face. This doesn't mean becoming robotic or cold. Rather, it means choosing which emotions to display and when. Understanding that predictable emotional responses make you manageable, while unpredictable responses make you formidable. Think about the people who have genuinely unsettled you throughout your life. Chances are, they weren't the ones who screamed or threatened. They were the ones whose reactions you couldn't predict, whose thoughts you couldn't read, whose next move remained a mystery. This uncertainty triggered your brain's ancient survival mechanisms, creating a state of alertness and respect that explicit threats never could have achieved. Physical presence plays a crucial role in this psychological theater, but not in the way most people imagine. It's not about appearing larger or more aggressive. Instead, it's about occupying space with intention and purpose. The psychologically intimidating person moves deliberately, never rushing, never appearing frantic or uncertain. Their body language suggests they know something others don't, that they're operating from a position of information superiority, even when discussing mundane topics. Eye contact becomes a particularly powerful tool in this arsenal, but again, not in the aggressive, staring way that most people attempt. The truly intimidating gaze is one that seems to see through facades, that appears to be analyzing and categorizing while revealing nothing of the conclusions being drawn. It's the look of someone conducting a psychological examination while maintaining perfect social politeness. This creates cognitive dissonance in the observer, who simultaneously feels studied and uncertain about the nature of that study. Silence, when deployed strategically, becomes more powerful than any words. In negotiations, the person who can tolerate silence forces others to fill the void, often with concessions or information they hadn't planned to share. In social situations, comfortable silence from one person makes others uncomfortable enough to reveal more than they intended. This isn't about being rude or antisocial, but about understanding that in a world of constant noise, the person who can embrace quiet wields enormous psychological leverage. The timing of your words becomes critical when you do choose to speak. The psychologically intimidating person never rushes to respond, never appears eager to contribute. There's always a pause, a moment of consideration that suggests deep thought and careful calculation. Even when discussing simple matters, this pause creates the impression that multiple layers of analysis are occurring, that the eventual response has been filtered through considerations others aren't sophisticated enough to understand. This calculated approach extends to decision-making as well. While others agonize publicly over choices, seeking validation and input from everyone around them, the intimidating person appears to make decisions from a place of inner certainty. They don't explain their reasoning unless absolutely necessary, and even then, they reveal only the minimum required for the situation. This creates an aura of competence and foresight that makes others hesitant to challenge their judgment. Knowledge becomes a weapon when wielded properly, but not in the way most people assume. It's not about flaunting intelligence or demonstrating expertise at every opportunity. Instead, it's about revealing knowledge strategically in moments when it creates maximum impact. The person who obviously studied philosophy doesn't intimidate anyone. The person who casually references Nietzsche in a way that perfectly illuminates a business problem without calling attention to their erudition creates an entirely different impression. This strategic revelation of competence extends to all areas of expertise. The intimidating person allows their capabilities to emerge naturally through their actions and results, rather than through their claims. They understand that demonstrated competence is infinitely more powerful than advertised competence, and that the person who feels compelled to prove their abilities usually lacks them. Understanding human psychology becomes essential for wielding this mysterious power responsibly. The goal isn't to manipulate or harm others, but to command respect and create healthy boundaries. The psychologically intimidating person uses their presence to establish themselves as someone who shouldn't be taken lightly, someone whose time and attention have value, someone who operates from a position of strength rather than weakness. This approach proves particularly valuable in situations where traditional authority doesn't exist. In social groups, professional peer relationships, or any environment where hierarchical power isn't clearly defined, psychological presence becomes the determining factor in who leads and who follows. The person who can project competence, mystery, and controlled power without explicit displays of aggression naturally rises to positions of influence. The cultivation of this mysterious intimidation requires careful attention to consistency. Unlike aggressive displays, which can be turned on and off as needed, psychological presence must be maintained as a constant state of being. It becomes part of your identity, woven into how you move through the world. This consistency is what creates the lasting impression, what makes others remember you as someone significant rather than someone merely loud. Privacy becomes a cornerstone of this approach. In an era where people document and share every aspect of their lives, the person who maintains mystery about their personal thoughts, relationships, and activities automatically becomes more intriguing. This doesn't mean becoming secretive to the point of suspicion, but rather being selective about what you reveal and to whom. The person who everyone knows everything about holds no mystery, while the person who reveals themselves in careful doses maintains perpetual interest. The management of your reputation requires the same strategic thinking. Rather than trying to control how others perceive you through constant explanation and justification, you allow your actions to speak while remaining largely silent about your motivations and methods. This forces others to draw their own conclusions, and the human mind tends to attribute greater intelligence and capability to those whose thought processes remain opaque. Energy conservation becomes both a practical and psychological advantage. While others exhaust themselves through emotional displays, verbal battles, and constant self-advocacy, the psychologically intimidating person conserves their energy for moments when it will have maximum impact. This conservation creates an impression of limitless reserves, of someone who never shows their full capabilities because they never need to. The development of genuine confidence underlies all these techniques. Artificial confidence can be spotted immediately and undermines any attempt at psychological intimidation. True confidence comes from competence, from knowing that you can handle whatever situations arise without needing to prove it to others constantly. This inner certainty radiates outward, creating the foundation upon which all other intimidation techniques are built. Patience becomes a virtue that separates the truly intimidating from the merely aggressive. The person who can wait, who doesn't rush to defend themselves or prove their point, who allows situations to develop at their own pace, demonstrates a kind of strength that reactive people cannot match. This patience suggests long-term thinking, strategic planning, and the confidence to let events unfold rather than forcing immediate resolutions. The cultivation of unpredictability within reasonable bounds keeps others constantly reassessing their understanding of you. This doesn't mean being erratic or unreliable, but rather ensuring that your responses and decisions don't fall into easily recognizable patterns. The person who always reacts the same way becomes manageable, while the person whose responses vary thoughtfully remains a puzzle worth solving. Ultimately, the mysterious art of being feared without threatening comes down to understanding that true power is psychological rather than physical, internal rather than external, and demonstrated through restraint rather than action. It's about becoming the person others think about when you're not there, the one whose opinions carry weight. Because they're rarely given, whose presence changes the dynamic of any room without obvious effort. This is not about becoming cold, calculating, or manipulative. Instead, it is about developing a mature understanding of human psychology and using that understanding to establish yourself as someone worthy of respect. It's about creating healthy boundaries, commanding appropriate attention, and influencing situations through presence rather than force. The path to mastering this mysterious intimidation begins with self-awareness and self-control. You must first understand your own psychological patterns, your default responses, your emotional triggers, and your automatic behaviors. Only when you can observe these patterns objectively can you begin to modify them strategically. This internal work forms the foundation for external influence, creating the genuine confidence and controlled presence that others find both attractive and slightly unsettling. Remember that this power comes with responsibility. The ability to psychologically influence others should be used ethically, to create positive outcomes and healthy relationships rather than to manipulate or harm. The truly powerful person understands that their strength is best demonstrated through restraint, their intelligence through selective revelation, and their confidence through calm presence rather than dramatic display. As you begin to implement these principles, start small and build gradually. Notice how others respond when you speak less in meetings, when you pause before responding to questions, when you maintain calm in situations that typically trigger emotional reactions. Observe the subtle shifts in how people interact with you as you become less predictable and more mysterious in your responses and decisions. The mysterious art of being feared without threatening is ultimately about becoming the most interesting person in the room, not through what you say or do, but through who you are and how you choose to present yourself to the world. It's about mastering the space between thoughts and actions, between stimulus and response, between what others expect and what you choose to reveal. This is your invitation to step into a more powerful version of yourself, one that commands respect through presence rather than demanding it through action, one that influences through mystery rather than controlling through force. The path requires patience, practice, and genuine self-development, but the destination offers a form of personal power that no external force can diminish or destroy.